There is actual science behind why some YouTube channels turn viewers into paying clients, while others just rack up views that never convert to anything. But most business owners making videos completely ignore the layer underneath the content that most people never see. Psychological principles that have been studied and documented for decades. And once you understand how they work, you can engineer your videos to do all the heavy lifting of selling for you without ever feeling salesy. So here's how this works. There are 3 stages every viewer goes through before they become a client. First, they have to actually watch your video, not click off after 10 seconds. Second, they have to start trusting you, right? Seeing you as someone who actually knows what they're talking about. And third, they have to take action. They have to move from YouTube to your website where they can actually become a paying client. So each of these stages have specific psychological triggers that either move people forward or just lets them slip away. So today, I'm showing you the tricks you can use and the actual brain science behind each one, including examples so that you can see exactly how you can apply these to your videos and get way more clients from the views you get. So let's talk about what actually keeps eyeballs on your videos, and it all starts with a discovery made almost 100 years ago. Back in the 1920s, a psychologist named Bluma Zygarnik noticed something strange whenever she'd go out to a restaurant. The waiters could remember really complex orders, multiple tables, tons of different food details perfectly, but only until the food was delivered. Once that order was complete, the information just vanished from their memory. So what she found was the brain holds on to incomplete things. It keeps them running in the background like a browser tab that you can't close. But the moment something feels finished, your brain releases it and it moves on. This is called the Zygarnik effect, and on YouTube, it's one of the most powerful retention tricks you have. When you open a loop, a question, a mystery, an unresolved problem, your viewer's brain flags it as unfinished business, and it genuinely bothers them to leave before it's resolved. So how do you use this? Just start your video by opening up the loop that you don't close right away. Tease something specific that's coming, but don't deliver it yet. So if you're a therapist, you might say,
"There's one phrase people say to anxious loved ones that actually makes the anxiety worse." We'll come back to that in just a minute.
Or if you're a financial advisor,
most people make one critical mistake when they roll over their 401k, and it can cost them thousands in hidden fees. But before I reveal what it is, we need to talk about
the viewer's brain flags it as unfinished, so they stick around so they can close the loop. And you can also use lists to create multiple mini loops. So when you say,
these are the 3 stretches that actually help sciatica, especially number 2, which most people do completely wrong.
Now they're curious about number 2, right? That's another open loop pulling them forward. And here's where it gets even more effective. You can stack multiple loops throughout your video. So one big loop based on your video's main promise, then several smaller ones along the way, little teases and unresolved questions that keep their brain engaged. Think of it almost like every open loop is a small thread that your viewer's holding. And the more threads they're holding, the harder it's gonna be for them to leave. Then you close them one by one as you go, which gives them little hits of satisfaction while you're opening up new ones. But there's another force working alongside this, and it kicks in right at the beginning of your video. So let's say someone just clicked on your video. They gave you a chance, but within the first 20 or 30 seconds, their brain is subconsciously running a quick calculation. Is this gonna be worth my time? If the answer isn't obviously yes, they're gone. So this is where the anticipation effect comes in. Researchers found that when people know that a reward or payoff is coming, the anticipation itself fires up the brain's dopamine system, and that means they'll actually enjoy the waiting as long as they know something good is on the way. So your job in those first 30 seconds is to confirm for them that what they want is indeed coming up in this video. Now to do that, you just need to think about your video's title. So what 3 things would the average viewer definitely want answered based on that title? So if you're an estate planning attorney and your title is something like, "Is your estate plan outdated?" What would someone clicking that title want to know? Probably, how do I know if it's outdated? What specifically makes it outdated? And what do I do about it? Then you just want to tell them in the beginning that all 3 answers are coming up in the video. Now this does 2 things. First, it helps them relax, right? They know what's coming and why it matters. Second, it activates that anticipation response. So their brain is now looking forward to each of those payoffs. So they're riding the emotional high of expecting something good. In fact, this is so important that I like to actually put a slide on screen with the 3 bullet points while I say them out loud. That way they see it and hear it. Double reinforcement. And if you remember, I did this exact thing at the beginning of this video. But there's another tool that makes information actually stick, and it's one that most people massively underuse: stories. Here's what researchers have found over and over again. People remember stories better than data. Way better. It's called narrative transportation. When somebody gets absorbed in a story, their attention, comprehension, and memory all go up at the same time. And it makes sense. Humans have been passing down knowledge through stories for thousands of years. Our brains are literally wired for it. Narrative structure, characters, conflict, resolution, all that stuff gives context and emotion to information. And that's the part that makes it stick. So think about it this way, right? If I tell you consistency is important for building trust with your audience, that is true. But it's also forgettable, right? You've heard some version of that 100 times before. But if I told you about a client who was ready to delete her channel after 6 months of crickets until she changed one thing and landed her first $10,000 client from YouTube 90 days later, now you're leaning in. You want to know what she changed, and whatever lesson comes out of that story is just going to stick with you way longer than another generic tip. So how do you use this? Frame some of your lessons like short stories. It could be a personal experience. It could be a client win. It could even be something that you just saw online or read about. The key is there's a character, a struggle, and a resolution. So if you're a physical therapist, you might say,
I had a runner come in last month. She'd already seen 2 other PTs and was told she'd never run a marathon again. But during her exam, I found something that everyone else missed.
See how that creates an open loop and pulls you into a story at the same time? It's a powerful combo. No matter how good your content is, people have a tendency to zone out. It's not personal, it's just how the brain works. So when things stay the same for too long, we slip into autopilot. You're watching, but you're not really watching. Your mind starts wandering to whatever you're making for dinner or the email you forgot to send earlier. This is where the novelty effect comes in. So your brain is wired to pay attention to anything new or unexpected. It's a survival mechanism. Like, hey, that tiger's new. And the way you trigger that on video is through something called a pattern interrupt. So that's just any unexpected change that snaps the brain back to attention, and in this case, brings the focus back to your videos. So you want to reset attention every 60 to 90 seconds with some kind of visual or tonal shift. Doesn't have to be fancy, switch from your face to a screen share or cut to a diagram or a whiteboard. Change your camera angle or pull up a quick example on screen. Now, if you're filming mostly talking head style, it's especially important. So plan your pattern interrupts ahead of time. Where can you cut to some B-roll footage like this? Where can you show some text on screen to make them pay special attention to something important? And honestly, like right now, AI makes it super easy just to make any B-roll you want, even stuff with you in it, and even cool motion graphics like this. Research shows that people stick around longer for things that get better over time. So the order of the points that you're teaching matters more than you'd expect. Even when the total amount of good stuff is the same, a sequence of tips or advice that seems to be getting better feels more satisfying than one that, feels like it started off strong, but then it peters out. So here's how to take advantage of this and structure your content so it feels like it's getting better. For every video you make, you want to figure out your best 3 points. By best, I mean the ones that feel the most unique or unexpected or the most interesting. Then here's the order. Put your second best point first, that's your strong opening. Put your absolute best point second. That way the viewer thinks, wow, the first point was great, this one's even better. So then they assume it's going to keep going on that upward trajectory. Then you want to put your third best point last for a strong finish. That's going to activate principle number 6, the peak end rule, where people disproportionately remember how things end. A strong finish is going to make them remember that the whole video is pretty good. Then everything else is going to go in descending order between point 2 all the way to the end. I don't know if you've ever caught yourself doing this, but people subconsciously will match the energy of whoever they're talking to, or in our case, watching. If your delivery feels flat, they're gonna feel disengaged. If you seem uncertain about the advice you're giving, they're gonna feel uncertain about taking it. But if you bring clarity, confidence, and energy, they're gonna mirror that too. So your delivery literally sets the emotional tone for how your information is received. And this isn't woo-woo stuff either, it's well documented. Humans are social animals, and we instinctively sync up with the people that we're paying attention to. And on video, that person's you. So before you hit record, decide, how do you want your viewer to feel by the end? Calm, motivated, reassured, fired up? Then you want to match your voice, your facial expressions, and your pacing to that emotion. And it's not about faking it, you're just being intentional about the energy you're bringing. So this also means adjusting for the topic. You know, a therapist talking about grief and a fitness coach hyping up a workout shouldn't and probably wouldn't sound the same. An accountant explaining audit red flags needs different energy than a wedding planner walking through venue options. So just match the energy to the moment. And here's a pro tip here. You want to shift your energy as the video goes on. So maybe you start with empathy by showing you understand their problem. Then you would get clear and confident when you're teaching. Then you would finish with some excitement to get them pumped about taking action. Just remember, if you seem bored, they're going to be bored. If you're into it, they're into it. Your brain can only process so much information at once. And when your viewers hit that limit, they don't try harder to understand. They just mentally check out. This is called cognitive load, and it's why cramming 5 big ideas into a 6-minute video almost always backfires. You think you're giving more value, but your viewer's brain hits a wall. So how do you reduce cognitive load for your viewers so they feel like they're getting great info, but they're not overwhelmed by it? First, you just want to keep each video focused on one core idea, not 3 ideas, not everything you need to know about X, right? One clear thing they'll walk away understanding. If a topic genuinely needs multiple ideas, make it a series. Second, if you're covering steps or tips, clearly number and separate them. You know, here's step 1, here's step 2. That gives the brain a structure to hang information on. Lists like that work because they're simple and organized. Third, and this one's big, you want to aim for a 7th grade reading level. Yes, even if your audience is smart, even if you're talking about complex topics like tax strategy or attachment theory or contract law. Using simple language isn't dumbing it down, it's removing the friction so your ideas actually land. And using visuals is a great way to offload some of that cognitive load too. So put a checklist on screen as you go over it. That lets their eyes do some of the work so their brain doesn't have to, hold on to everything. And if you're not sure whether your script is too complicated, just run it through ChatGPT or Claude and have it simplify it to a 7th grade level. It's really good at that, even if you might be too close to a topic to be able to put it in layman's terms. Even then, some ideas are just hard to explain, but if you compare a complex idea to something they already get, suddenly it clicks. That's what conceptual anchoring does. It lets someone borrow what they already understand about one thing and use it to understand something new through a really good metaphor. Metaphors and analogies can take something complicated and turn it into a simple picture. And once someone sees that picture in their head, they're way more likely to trust what you're saying. Plus, people just remember pictures way longer than they remember a list of tips. So what makes a metaphor actually land? Obviously, it needs to fit, right? The comparison has to make sense. You can't just throw random images together. And it should point to one clear lesson, not 3 or 4. A therapist might say,
avoiding your anxiety is like holding a beach ball underwater. It takes constant effort and eventually it's going to shoot back up. Learning to let it rise, notice it, and let it drift, that's where relief begins.
Or a fitness coach.
Skipping the warm-up is like starting your car in a freezing Minnesota winter and flooring it. You might get away with it a few times, but eventually, something's gonna break.
Notice how each one takes something kind of abstract and makes it instantly visual. That's what you're going for here. And honestly, you don't even have to think of these yourself anymore. ChatGPT is really good at it. So that beach ball one and the one about the car not starting, I just got those right from ChatGPT. So just tell it what you're trying to explain, ask for like 5 unique concepts, and you're almost always gonna get something good. All right, everything so far has been about getting people to watch more of your videos, but watching isn't enough. For them to become a client, they need to trust you. So part 2 here is all about building that trust faster. Have you ever watched someone on YouTube and felt like you actually know them? Like you could totally be friends with that person if you ever met in real life. That's not just in your head, it's a real psychological phenomenon called parasocial theory. And these one-sided relationships can feel kind of like real friendships, even though the other person doesn't know you exist. And researchers have found that these bonds get stronger when you appear warm and share personal things about yourself. And this is actually a huge advantage for YouTube over other marketing channels, because you're not a faceless brand, you're a person that they see and hear all the time. And over time, that creates a sense of friendship. So how do you strengthen that bond? First, you want to pretend like you're talking to a friend. So that means like saying you and we, looking into the lens, not at yourself on your camera screen. Use a conversational tone like you're talking to, one person or just a small little group, not presenting to a crowd, That is what's going to create the feeling of a face-to-face conversation. Second, you want to share some personal stuff. Not everything, don't go too deep, but enough that they feel like they actually know you. Your stories, your values, your struggles, behind the scenes moments. A financial advisor who shares the money mistakes they made in their 20s, or a nutritionist who mentions their own daily food struggles, right? This builds trust and makes you feel human, not just like an expert talking at them. Third, be consistent. So when you post regularly, viewers start to follow along with your life. They remember that project you mentioned or that challenge you were working through. Fourth, make it feel more like a two-way street. So reply to comments, mention questions people have asked. Say things like, someone asked me last week about, even though it's not a real back and forth conversation, it starts to feel like one. People trust things that other people trust. It's just how we're wired. Psychologists call this the principle of consensus. Think about walking down a street. You're really hungry and you see two restaurants. One's packed, there's a line out the door. The other one is completely empty. Which one do you want to eat at? The busy one, right? Because you figure all of those people can't be wrong. That's social proof in action. When we're not sure about something, we look at what other people are doing to figure out if it's good or not. And we do it all the time and don't even realize it. On YouTube, your viewers are doing the same thing. They're looking for signals that other people have trusted you and gotten results. And the easiest way to lean into this principle is just to mention results that you've helped real people get. Not vague stuff, specific outcomes whenever you can. So things like, I worked with a client last year who couldn't sleep more than 4 hours a night. Within 6 weeks, she was getting 7 hours consistently. That's social proof wrapped up in a story. Or you can also mention how many people you've helped. So something like, after working with hundreds of couples on this exact issue, or I've helped over 50 business owners set this up. That tells people you've done this a lot. You're not just, building the airplane in midair. And every time you tell a client story, you're showing two things at once. That you have real experience and that what you're teaching actually works. So here's a mental shortcut pretty much everyone uses. If something took a lot of time and effort to make, it's probably valuable. And psychologists call this value perception. We rely on this because most of the time we can't really tell if advice is good or not. Is this legal strategy actually smart? Is that workout plan actually going to be effective? We don't have the knowledge to know firsthand, so we look for other clues. And one of the biggest clues is the effort that went into something. So the thinking goes, why would someone spend 15 years mastering something if it wasn't worth it? When you show people how much time and work went into your expertise, they're gonna feel safer trusting you. So just tell people how long you've been working on this stuff. Share the mistakes you made along the way. Talk about what you learned the hard way. Like, I've spent 20 years figuring out how to explain this to clients, or after seeing this pattern hundreds of times, here's what I learned. That gives them a reason to trust you, and that matters a lot when you're selling your expertise. Showing your experience is powerful, but being honest about your failures, that's a whole different level of trust. They call this the transparency effect. It sounds kind of backwards, but it's true. Being open about what doesn't work actually makes people trust you more, not less. When someone admits they messed something up or says, hey, this doesn't work for everyone, that feels honest, and honesty builds trust. So share those past mistakes. Like, I used to recommend this approach until it backfired on 3 clients in a row. Here's what I do now instead. That shows that you've learned. It shows you're willing to admit when you got it wrong. We tend to trust people who remind us of ourselves, and psychologists call this the similarity attraction effect. And it's one of the most reliable findings out there. When we feel like someone is similar to us, we like them more. And when we like them more, we trust them more. So it really helps to use examples and language that actually sound like your audience, which means you want to pay attention to how your actual clients describe their problems, the words they use, the way they explain their frustrations. Then you want to use that same language in your videos. So when viewers hear their own words coming out of your mouth, they feel like you understand them. So can you say things to influence that? Yes. But the other side of this usually happens pretty naturally and you don't have a lot of say over it. And that's to do with people also tending to prefer to watch people that are pretty similar to them. I'm talking things like age, gender, similar life stage. So when I look at my analytics, I'm a 45-year-old guy, and that's pretty much who watches my videos the most. And it'll probably be the same for you too. So just lean into it, don't fight it. If you're a 35-year-old mom, you're naturally gonna attract other moms in a similar season of life. But if you're a 60-year-old man trying to become the go-to expert for young moms, that's going to be an uphill battle. They would probably rather get that information from someone who looks and sounds more like them. All right, so now they're watching your videos and they trust you, but that doesn't mean they're automatically going to become clients. You know, most people assume that viewers will just find their way to the website and reach out all on their own. That almost never happens, right? So part 3 is about closing that gap. And there are a few specific brain tricks that can help move people from passive viewer over to paying client, and that's what we're getting into right now. When someone gives you something valuable, you feel a pull to give something back. And psychologists call this the reciprocity principle. And it's one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. On YouTube, this works in your favor when you give real value without holding anything back. So here's where a lot of people get it wrong. They teach the surface level stuff in their free content, but then they gatekeep the real information for paying clients. The thinking is, why would anyone pay me if I give away my best stuff for free? But it actually works the opposite way. When you teach generously, when you give them the real information, the actual strategy, the stuff that actually helps, you trigger reciprocity. So they feel like they owe you something at that point. Then when you eventually offer a way to work with you, saying yes feels so much more natural. It's not a cold transaction. It's kind of like returning a favor. So give them the real stuff. If you're a physical therapist, show the actual exercises. If you're a financial advisor, share the actual strategy. So say things like, I want you to try this yourself before you ever consider working with someone like me. Then at the end, if this helped you and you want to go deeper, here's how I can help. But don't pitch until you've actually helped them first. Reciprocity only works if the value comes before the ask. People act faster when they think they might miss out. This is the scarcity principle in action. When anything feels limited, whether it's time, availability, or quantity, our brains just give it more value. And we're motivated to act before it's gone. So you've definitely felt this yourself if you've ever been on a website that says only 3 left in stock, or sale ends tonight, or limited spots available. Remember all those crazy viral Black Friday videos? This is that. So how do you trigger this kind of reaction on YouTube? In some of your videos, you want to end with a direct call to action, something like, go to my website, book a call, sign up for this thing. And that's where you can let your viewers know when your availability is genuinely limited, right? Like, I only take on 4 new clients per month, or my calendar opens up once a quarter. I'm running this workshop 1 time this year. And no, it is not manipulative to tell the truth about your availability. It's helpful. It lets people know that if they're serious, they shouldn't wait forever to reach out because it's gonna be gone. But it goes without saying here, you gotta be honest. Real scarcity motivates action, but fake scarcity, that's gonna backfire and make them trust you less. I think one of the most interesting and useful sales psychology hacks is knowing that small yeses lead to bigger yeses. So once someone takes a really small step with you, they're way more likely to take the next one and the next one after that. And psychologists call this the commitment and consistency principle. Each action builds momentum and makes the next action easier. So if someone comments on your video, they've made a small commitment. If they download your free guide, that's a bigger one. If they watch 5 of your videos in a row, they're now someone who follows your content, right? Each step makes the next step feel more natural. Now here's the thing. You can't control where someone is in that process. You don't know if this is their first video or their 50th. So the move is just to include different sized asks across all of your videos. Some videos have a small ask, like drop a comment below with your biggest question. Some will point to a free download, and some have a bigger call to action, like book a call or check out my program. People are just gonna take the action that they're comfortable with at the time. You know, someone brand new might just comment. Someone who's been watching for months might finally grab that free guide, and someone who's already done all of that, they're ready for the bigger step. So you're not forcing anyone up a ladder here. You're just making sure there's always a next step available, whatever size they're ready for. And eventually, after enough small yeses, the big yes feels like the obvious move. The whole point of doing YouTube for your business is getting people to go from your video to your website where they can see what you offer and book with you. That's the goal. But here's the problem. People are wired to take the easiest path available. Psychologists call this the law of least effort. So let's just say they watched a few of your videos and they're interested in working with you. But if they have to search all through your channel to find your website and then figure out what you offer and then track down a contact page, most of them won't make it. Not because they're not interested, you just gave them too much work to do. So just make it stupid easy. Put a website link in your channel page. They give you a section to do it, and don't give them other options. Just put your website link and that's it. No social media, nothing else. But more importantly, you also want to put that same link at the very top of every video description, above the fold, before anyone has to click show more. That way your viewers just have to, tap once while they're still feeling that momentum from your video. That's when they're most likely to do it. But here's the thing, none of these psychological principles just magically happen, right? They all have to be built into your script. The open loops, the stories, the trust triggers, the calls to action. All of it lives or dies based on how you structure what you actually say in your videos. So if you want to see exactly how to write a YouTube script that puts all of this into action, watch this video next, where I break down the perfect script structure step by step, and you're going to see just how much psychology goes into every single section. So get it right from the start, and you're going to be converting views to clients in way less time. Click right here, and I'm going to show you my whole perfect script formula in just a second.